My first stop on my interactive timeline is Havinghurst, 1978. Havinghurst, 1978. During the 19th century, large numbers of immigrant communities formed enclaves and promoted their language, religion, and cultural loyalties, what Havinghurst calls defensive pluralism. They believed that if it was feasible to maintain their ancestral ways of life while concurrently participating in the civil life of the nation. A number of states passed laws that authorized bilingual education. Next is 1889, the American Protective Association. The American Protective Association promoted English-only school laws, which Illinois and Wisconsin adopted in 1889. The 1890s witnessed the founding of the Immigration Restriction League, as well as early agitation for a literacy test that would require any immigrant wishing to settle in the United States to have the ability to read 40 words in any language. The next stop on my PowerPoint is 1923, English-only instruction in 34 states. From 1918 to 1920, the Bureau of Naturalization and the Bureau of Education of the United States sponsored bills that provide for substantial federal aid to states on a dollar matching basis to finance the teaching of English to aliens and native illiterates. By 1923, the legislators of 34 states had dictated English-only instruction in all private and public primary schools. Next is 1923, Meyer v. Nebraska prohibition to teach foreign language was unconstitutional. In Meyer v. Nebraska, the Supreme Court declared Nebraska's prohibition against teaching foreign languages in elementary schools to be unconstitutional on the basis of the 14th Amendment. Although Claus saw this decision as a Magna Carta for private nationality schools because it enabled all immigrant groups to cultivate their language as a subject matter in private elementary schools. This case actually had little or no effect in arresting the demise of bilingual instruction during the first half of the 20th century. Next is 1964, Civil Rights Act. This failure to nurture linguistic diversity began to change slowly in the 1960s because of the Civil Rights Movement and the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which in turn led to the creation of the Office for Civil Rights. The rebirth of instruction in languages other than English also resulted from changes in immigration laws. Next is 1965, the Immigration Act. Asians and Latin Americans begin to enter the country. Immigration Act revoked the Naturalization Act of 1906 and terminated the 1924 National Origin Quota System. As a result of the 1965 Immigration Act, larger numbers of Asians and Latin Americans started to enter the country. With the demographic shift, more language minority students from these regions of the world appeared in the United States classrooms, where bilingual instruction was needed. Next is 1968, creation of the Bilingual Education Act. The Bilingual Education Act was the first piece of United States federal legislation that recognized the needs of limited English-speaking ability students. While many states such as California and Texas already had local and state policies to help language minority students, the BEA established the first federal policy aiding students of LESA. Its purpose was to provide school districts with federal funds in the form of competitive grants to establish innovative educational programs for students with limited English-speaking ability. The next stop on my timeline is Lau versus Nichols. Lau versus Nichols was a civil rights case that was brought by Chinese American students living in California who had limited English proficiency. The students claimed that they were not receiving special help in school due to the fact that they could not speak English. Finding that the lack of linguistically appropriate accommodations, for example, the educational services in English, effectively denied the Chinese students equal education opportunities on the basis of their ethnicity. The United States Supreme Court in 1974 ruled in favor of the students. 1980 to present, the California Proposition 187 was approved. It was approved restricting the services to illegal immigrants. Next was the California Proposition 227 passed. English became the primary medium of instruction for language minority students. These are the following websites I got my information from. Thanks for listening.